Hello, I'm Lesley Pyne, and today I'm talking to Tracey Cleantis, author of The Next Happy: Let Go of the Life You Planned and Find a New Way Forward. So, welcome, Tracey, and thank you so much for making the time to talk to me. Firstly, let
Thank
me
you.
say that I absolutely love your book. I feel that you give readers permission to stop pursuing a dream, and importantly, great tools and techniques to work through the loss and find their next happy. And I love the way you use humour in your writing and also films as prescriptions. I mean, anyone who quotes Harry Potter gets my vote. So first of all, start by asking you to tell us a bit about the book and what prompted you to write it.
Thank you first of all for having me. It's my pleasure, absolute pleasure to be here. Boy, what prompted me to write this book? The first, well, let's talk about what the next happy is. It's a guidebook for surrender, and absolutely, I hope it gives people permission to stop pursuing something that may be destructive and hurtful.
Mm.
What prompted me to write the book was I was actually speaking at an infertility conference. And I was there with Lisa Manterfield from Life Without Baby, and we were on a panel of experts on how to be happy without the hope of a biological child.
Mm.
And I was a little bit nervous. And I was pretty convinced that there would be no one attending because if you're trying to actively pursue having a child, why on earth would you want to hear about being happy without a child?
Sure.
But it turns out there were a lot of people at the conference who were there. And as I looked out at the audience, I saw how desperate people were to hear the message and really wanted to know that there was light at the end of the tunnel, no matter
Sure.
what the tunnel was.
Mm.
And I realized that I actually, sitting on a panel, that I actually did know something about this.
Absolutely.
And I had learned this on my own, that there weren't books on what to expect at the end of an infertility journey, but there were plenty of books on pursuing
Absolutely.
having a child
Yeah.
and guidance on what to do and how to dream and what doctors to see and what to eat and actually in that moment I also realized that this was not something just specific to people going through infertility issues,
Mm.
that
Mm.
there's so many kinds of dreams that people invest so much in, as with infertility, and there isn't a lot of permission in the culture
Yeah.
or in the bookstore to let go of the dream.
Sure.
And I really wanted to share what I knew as a person who'd gone through this and as a therapist,
Sure.
and wanted to create a book that would help people through that process.
So certainly does that, I think. You encourage people to declare the time of death for the dream, which seems a bit final and scary. Why is that important?
I think it's important because it's a moment where everything changes, and it's a
Mm.
moment where everything changes for me, changed for me in my experience. Um, that being said, even as we declare the moment of death, and I talk about this in the book, um, that when anyone who's been through the loss of a pet and watched the process of losing a pet, veterinarians lovingly explain what to expect. That this isn't just a moment where immediately death happens,
Mm.
even as you claim it and as you name it. And so I wanted people to understand that there was a process that happens once you've decided there's no more,
Mm.
there's nothing more to do here.
Mm.
That there's a kind of cognitive death, there's a behavioral death, there's an emotional death,
Mm.
there's a motivational death, and so all of these processes occur once you say there's simply nothing more here to do.
Yeah.
But there's an experience of uh, all of those stages that happen after you name it,
Mm.
and the grieving can begin, and believe it or not, the next happy can start to sneak in.
Because it seems to me that sort of time of death, that's when you know it here, and then
Yes,
getting to know it here, that's a long
yes,
way, isn't it? It's like a million miles, and
absolutely.
that's through grieving. That
Yeah,
that's yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I think for me, in my moment where I call time of death, it was, I think I started with motivation and behavioral death before it was almost cognitive. I mean, I think that intellectually, I still very much wanted to have a
Yeah,
child.
yeah,
Um, and certainly emotionally, oh, yeah, I
yeah,
definitely still wanted
absolutely.
to have a child. But I didn't have the motivation. I was exhausted. I was exhausted in terms of resources, so that there wasn't the motivation to act. And so that's for me where it started.
Yeah,
And then once the motivational death occurred, then the behavioral death occurred. I couldn't go to the doctor. I couldn't do the things that would allow me to make that dream a reality. And then all of a sudden, through grieving, the cognitive death happened. And I don't know if emotional death is something I even want to fully get to. I think that
absolutely.
there's still some emotional longing for that, and I'm okay with that.
That's the thing. It's about being okay with what's left, isn't it? Really, that's
Yeah.
and I'm glad you talk about grief because it's for me. I didn't realise I was grieving, and it was only we stopped trying. I don't know, 12 years ago, and then my mum died 5, 7 years ago, and it was only after that that I actually fully started grieving, and I can. So it's good to know that it's not just actual things, actual people that we should be grieving for. It's dreams as well. So yeah, maybe you
Yes.
could just talk about the grieving process a little bit.
Yeah, I think you make such a good point. I think that we're not given permission to grieve unless it's a person.
Mm.
And I really hope in this book that I make the case that grief is so vital to getting to your next happy, and so important, and to I kind of take the reader's hand and walk you through the process of, again, of what to expect when you're grieving, because we're just not given permission. And when we call that time of death, people around us, people who love us, want to say, okay, there's a bright side to this, and make the next goal and find the silver lining. And people are not so okay with our sadness and our anger and our rage and our envy and all of those feelings. And probably we're not either.
Absolutely.
They're
Yeah.
not so comfortable. It would be better to feel perky and happy and cheerful, but that's not the truth of it. When you've invested so much in a dream and you've cared so much about something, it's the appropriate reaction is
Absolutely.
to.
It is, and I think that there's so many we pick up family beliefs, don't we? I only just realised this actually because I know it's like I consciously after my mum died I was thinking I'm going to get sad, and I consciously put that feeling into a box and put the lid on it. And
Ah,
that's you talk about that and how these rules come, we just build up through our life, and it's a great revelation to know that, isn't it?
absolutely. And I think it's very much out of our family that we learn what feelings and emotions are right, and which are not. And when people come in for therapy, it seems that when they talk about what feelings are okay, it's very clear that I'm hearing family history,
Yeah.
and it also comes off as a kind of absolute rule. Sadness is not okay. Um, you better go to your room and put on, cry in there and come out when you're happy, or
Sure,
or,
sure.
or turn that frown upside down. Or in some families, sadness is okay and anger is not.
Sure.
So in those families, okay, it's okay for me to cry, but it is certainly not okay for me to feel anger.
Sure.
And in the process of grief, all of those feelings need space and are appropriate. And I really conceptualize the feelings that come up as a kind of weather.
Yes.
And we need to experience that weather, and yes, not get stuck in that weather, not only be in the rain or the thunder or whatever, but allow that to move through us, and know that this will not last forever, even though we're pretty
Yeah.
sure that.
I love that weather metaphor because you sometimes you might feel like you're living in Antarctica, but even in Antarctica's spring comes, doesn't it? As you
That's
say,
right.
feelings pass, and it's like we have to really delve into them and feel them, and not put them in that box. Yes, that's great to know
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. Okay. Um, I think the important thing I think is you're right that it's not the dream we want; it's something else. I mean, I absolutely get that, and it's a bit tough to hear, isn't it? Though it's this sort of saying that, did I want children? Yes, I did, but there's
Yes.
something about that. So maybe you just talk about that for a couple of minutes.
Sure. In my work as a psychotherapist, I work a lot with nighttime dreams. People come in and talk about their dreams.
Mm,
And I think whether they realize it or not, they're sort of asking, what does this mean?
mm,
What does it
mm,
mean that I'm dreaming this? And it's very rare that we ask of ourselves, what does this dream mean that I want a child or that I want this kind of relationship or I want this kind of career or whatever the dream may be? What does it mean that I want this so much? And even as a therapist, I was a little bit resistant to this idea. It
mm,
was actually my own therapist who asked me the question in the middle of me grieving in a serious way. Why did you want this so much? And it seemed absurd. It seemed self-evident. People want children. But there was something in that question that started to help me see that there was something else that
mm,
I wanted.
mm,
And that really gave me some freedom to first find out was there another way to have this, and not in the traditional way. And I think probably anyone going through infertility here's the standard. Uh, well, you can be an aunt, you can be a godmother, you can take care of other
mm,
people's children, and that's really not helpful.
mm,
Um, that's in terms of figuring out a way to get what you want from the dream. For me, it was very much about wanting to create a kind of childhood for another
mm.
uh, that was different than the kind of childhood I had.
Sure.
I wanted to give this dream child a certain kind of home, a certain kind of education, a certain kind of love that was very different than what I grew up in.
Sure. Sure.
And in knowing that, I was able to start to give that some of that to myself.
Mm,
And that was so much more meaningful than any advice about, just hang out with your friends' kids or babysit or work with
sure.
children. That really helped me heal in a
Mm.
way that was very unexpected.
Because it's not often it's not the things, it's the feelings that we want that go with them, isn't it? So it's like digging into that feeling and then working out how we can get it in another way. So that's really powerful, I think. Yes. Okay. Ta-da. So I was just going to say, you talk about. I'm just moving on to being positive now. You talk about everyone you interviewed found a new happiness and deeper meaning um, in the loss that they wouldn't have found any other way. So I think that's really powerful, isn't it? I mean, so what did they do? They grieved and then what? Um,
It's so interesting, and I don't know if you felt this way, Lesley, but there was a point where I imagined, without having a child, that I could never be happy.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
And everyone I spoke to had that same
Mm,
feeling and that same conviction.
mm,
And it was so extraordinary in conversation after conversation. I was sort of expecting someone to say, no, no, it hasn't all worked out.
yeah.
Um, but with each person, there was something through really grieving the dream,
Mm,
through discovering the meaning of what they wanted the dream to give them,
yeah.
and allowing space, which I think is such an important
Sure.
element we all know that a rebound relationship is not a great thing.
Mm, mm,
But we don't hear so much about rebound dreams. And there really needs to be some space after the grief to kind of see where your interests lie. What all of a sudden has sparkle, or
mm,
what class do you want to take, or what do you want to do, or and have it be not a dream, but just to kind of follow interests.
mm,
And each person I talked to in the book who did that found themselves in careers and activities and relationships and pursuits that they'd never imagined.
mm,
And it was through trying and not through quickly saying, okay, this didn't work out, so I'm going to quickly run into adoption, or
mm,
this relationship didn't work out, so I'm going to quickly get back into dating, or whatever it is, to not to make the obvious next choice, but to grieve it, to feel it, and
mm,
then to see what happens organically.
mm. That's because you talk also about accepting and owning it and using it as an opportunity. That's again that's very powerful for me. Owning my story has sort of transformed my life, and I guess that's the same for you, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, amazing.
I didn't imagine that I would ever be um, sharing this message, let alone being in my own next happy. So
Mm, mm,
it's really extraordinary and emotional
mm,
to be able to hear that this is meaningful and helpful
mm,
for other people.
mm.
And it I kind of jokingly talk about that it's my this book is my baby,
Sure.
and to really feel like my baby is making a difference in the world and being helpful for other people in this is
Mm,
extraordinary.
mm. And you say that if you'd had children, you would never have known the happiness you're enjoying so fully today, and you wouldn't trade that for anything, not even children. I mean, that's really powerful, isn't it? And you
It
look pretty
is.
happy, I must say.
Yeah, it's I just when I look back at that self who was in such grief, and if anyone had told me that,
Mm,
I could have never believed it. And I bring that knowingness in the book, and I say, I know that it's likely you're not going to believe me. I know that
absolutely.
you think that this grief will never end. I know that you believe you may
Mm,
not get to your next happy, but trust me.
mm,
And this is why I interviewed so many people, Lesley, because
mm.
I didn't want people to think this is just something unique to
Absolutely.
you. Aren't you special and lucky you?
Yeah.
And it isn't just me. It's over and over. This is what
Mm,
happens. And I think by really fully feeling it, by really understanding it, and really making space
mm,
for interests as opposed to jumping in,
yeah.
this is how you get there.
Because it's tempting just to jump into something else, isn't it? But as you say, if you just sort of be for a bit and
Yes.
then see what happens.
But which
Um,
is not easy to do.
Absolutely, no,
It's
not
just not
easy,
easy to do.
not easy.
I do talk in the book about the importance of support and, blogs like yours and communities where you can turn and see other people's experience and not feel alone in it, or
Mm,
getting into therapy or getting into a support group
yeah.
just so that you get to talk about it and you get
Mm,
space for this
mm,
is so important in the
mm.
process.
'Cause we tend to feel all alone, don't we? And so the power of Me Too and sharing your story is just, I don't know, I can't even, it's so powerful, it's amazing.
Yes.
I was got a bit quicker than I thought, but I'm just going to say, if listeners and readers took one thing from your book, what would you like that to be? I guess it's probably obvious, but
Oh gosh. That it's okay to give up on what isn't working,
mm,
and you're not a failure.
mm,
That's I guess my hope is that this book really gives people permission
mm,
to let go of what isn't working and know that happiness is possible even without that dream.
sure, sure. So, and anything else you'd like to tell people, other than go out and buy it, of course.
I think that if you're even listening to this interview, it means that you may be questioning it,
Mm,
maybe wondering if maybe it's the time. And I just want to say that this book isn't telling you
mm,
you have to quit, that you have to give up on the dream. It's saying, have a conversation with yourself,
yeah.
check in, and I ask a series of questions in the book that help you make the
Mm,
right decision for you. And
mm,
only you can determine this. This is not something that I can tell you to do, or that
mm,
Lesley can tell you to do. This is something that is very personal, and I just want you to sort of tune into yourself and really take the time to ask those questions so you can make the right decisions for you.
okay. Thank you very much. So, thank you to Tracey. Perhaps I don't know if you want to wave the book now. This is the time to
Absolutely.
wave the book. So that there's the copy of the Next Happy, and you can see the links to Tracey's website and blog below, and also where to buy it. So thank you, Tracey. That was really great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Leslie.
Okay,
My pleasure.
thank you.